This is hyperflash. This happens sometimes when you install LED bulbs instead of your normal turn signal bulbs. And this here is your typical automotive bulb. Tried and true for over 100 years now, but they're relatively dim and they go out pretty easily. So one solution is to upgrade to LEDs. But when you do that, you can have hyperflash. Hyperflash can happen because the resistance of the LED bulbs are significantly less than a normal turn signal bulb, or just any of the original bulbs in general. And because of that, these are considered dumb turn signal circuits. So when it sees less resistance, it flashes faster because there's more power available. When Volkswagen designed their turn signal systems from this B5 and before era, they decided to run all the power through the hazard switch right here. So that means the turn signal relay is built into the hazard switch. You can hear that inside here from the switch. So unfortunately, that means you cannot put in a solid state turn signal relay to fix hyperflash, because as far as I can tell, no one makes a solid state version of this switch. So really our solution is two things. One, we stay with the hyperflash, or two, we install a bunch of these load resistors in parallel with each turn signal bulb, which would bring the total circuit resistance back up, slowing them down. Now you should install them as close as you can to the original bulb, but I'm not going to do that because I happen to install this switch here. When I press this switch and pull out this one, that's right, I put a strobe controller on the wagon. That was part of the reason for going to these LEDs. I want the brightness and the quickness of these LEDs, and so putting the load resistors right next to these bulbs is going to have the opposite effect of what I want. It's going to act like a normal bulb, and that's just not fun. The reason this extra switch is here is because when it's pulled out like this and you use the normal turn signals, left turn is fine, right turn activates both of them, because that strobe controller is funky and cheap. So you push that switch in, disconnects a wire to that turn signal circuit, and your turn signals work like normal. Mostly normal. Alright, so since we can't put our resistors by the bulbs themselves, we need to put them before the strobe controller, but after the turn signal, or the flash relay. So that means we have to go in behind this switch and see if we can connect some to the wiring harness back there, and we'll see how many we actually need to get our total resistance high enough to have normal functioning bulbs. So once we have the switch out, we can kind of look at our wiring harness here. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of slack to play with here. These two here are where I connected my strobe controller to the outputs of the switch left and right. So if I wanted to put those load resistors in before this wiring here, I would have to try and do it between those two there, between this point and these splices. So really I would undo all this, repin those wires, give me more slack so I could actually have space to wire it all. Okay, if you're one of the few people with a B5 Passat trailer hitch with a 4-wire trailer wiring hooked up to it, and you also put LED bulbs in your turn signals, what may happen during your turning before the hyper flash, when you press the brake pedal, your turn signal stops and both your brake lights in the cluster light up, although they do not light up outside the vehicle. This is because something in the trailer module itself, which I have tucked all the way back into there, something in there is causing the brake light to get backfeed into the turn signal. So I disabled that briefly with a simple switch in line with the left and right turn wires. So I do that. Now hit our turn signal, press our brake, and we're fine. Also, I forgot to mention that if your trailer wiring is hooked up and that issue is happening, it also gives you hyper flash. So if you go and disable that, you now have a more normal turning. So right now we have turn signals front and rear, all LEDs, as well as our side indicators here that I did in a prior video. And we actually have 3 different flashing speeds going on. So if me personally, if I wasn't trying to make a video out of this, I would be okay with my normal turns being a slightly different speed. They're still slower than a normal hyper flash, and hazards being hyper flash, I see that as kind of a safety measure. So yeah, it looks like this video is not going where I thought it was going to go. Turns out I'm not going to have to install any of these load resistors after all. Because that trailer wiring, when I installed it to that module, way down in there, turns out I just needed to interrupt the turn signal circuit here with this switch. And that gives me my normal blinker operation for driving, and I am okay with that. So I'm not going to go through the hassle of repinning the hazard switch controller here. It's just not worth the effort for me.